As Sunday dawned in the plains of central Sweden, I was standing in a large field with 15,000 Lycra-clad Scandinavians, the falling snow slowly accumulating on our shoulders, waiting for the start of the Vasaloppet, the world's oldest and biggest cross-country ski race. When the gun sounded, we would surge forward, ready to begin the 90-kilometre trek to the town of Mora. That distance may not mean much to a metrically challenged American, so look at it like this: it's 56 miles, or the equivalent of running the New York Marathon, drinking a cup of Gatorade in Central Park, and then running back to Staten Island. And then going back and forth across the Verrazano Narrows Bridge one more time, just for fun. And, given the size of the population of Sweden, it's as if 450,000 Americans turned up for the race. And did I mention that it was snowing? When the gun sounded, however, we did not surge forward. It turned out, instead, that 15,000 people heading up a steep hill and into the woods, each one wearing a 6-foot pair of skis and carrying 2 poles with sharp metal tips, create a massive bottleneck. It took an hour and a half for those of us at the back, shuffling forward a few inches at a time, to cover the first 3 kilometers. Imagine an endless version of climbing the rush hour stairs at Grand Central, except at 4 or 5 degrees below freezing. Imagine that everyone is good-humored and patient, or at the very least stolid. A political scientist might be able to extrapolate something about why Nordic socialism works. Though, oddly, the race commemorates a 16th-century revolt against a tax hike proposed by a king named Christian the Tyrant. But I'm not a political scientist. I'm not a physicist, either, but once we'd finally begun to separate enough to stop shuffling and start to ski, I reflected, as I had many times before, on the glory of this particular sport. All winter recreations owe their glory to the absence of friction. If you're playing soccer or football or the like, you need to fight for every foot of ground you cover, but a skate, or a skier, the runner on a luge, glides across that distance, melting a thin layer of water to float you over the surface. Most of these sports also recruit gravity to assist. If you're on a bobsled, Isaac Newton is doing most of the work. Nordic skiing is the exception. It forces you to fight gravity as well as exploit it. The chairlift does your quads and calves. Going up a steep snow-covered hill without slipping backward defies common sense, and the only way that we 15,000 we're going to make it to Mora was if chemistry could help us overcome physics. If you apply particular waxes in a thin layer to the bottom of a ski, they can allow a full-size human being to kick off against the snow and get enough push to propel him uphill. The first Swedes and Norwegians to figure this out spread various forms of tar on the bottom of their skis. At some points in the past century, early vinyl records were melted down for this purpose. By now chemists have concocted thousands of different formulations, each perfect for the shape of snow crystal that forms at different temperatures and different humidities. These come in small tins, and which tin to use is a matter of obsessive concern. If you miss the wax, then you're a cartoon figure, spinning your wheels helplessly in the snow. We'd all been reading the weather forecast hourly, and we all had a half-dozen tins in our packs, in case the conditions changed. When it works, though, it really works. There are few feelings as glorious as pushing down hard against the snow and feeling that energy converted into uphill glide. It's not quite as good as jumping on the moon, I suppose, but, on the other hand, we were surrounded by lovely Swedish pine forests, and every few kilometers there were squads of volunteers handing us warm cups of blueberry soup. It was glorious enough. That glory, like everything to do with ice and cold, is now under existential threat. As temperatures warm and winters shorten, traditions like the Vasaloppet or the Iditarod become ever more tenuous. Friction tries relentlessly to reassert its claims, taking away the sweet glide. Just the day before, at the World Championships of Cross-Country Skiing, in the Austrian Alps, the great American skier Jesse Diggins raced 30 kilometers in shorts, at the end of a week of competition that had seen record temperatures across much of Europe. The Scandinavians, it must be said, are doing their part to keep winter alive. I was there primarily to celebrate with students at Lund University, which traces its roots to 1438. They'd persuaded their trustees to divest their direct holdings from fossil fuel companies. This campaign, which I helped to launch, now includes endowments and portfolios around the world worth $8 trillion, most notably, the sovereign wealth fund of neighboring Norway, which is the largest single pool of investment capital on Earth, and which is taking at least initial steps to direct the money that it made from North Sea oil away from fossil fuels. And perhaps the most effective climate activist in the world right at the moment is a 16-year-old Swede, Greta Thunberg, who, in August, launched a one-girl climate strike from her Stockholm school, a campaign that has now spread across much of Europe and which will reach the United States on March 15. The race offered more than enough time to reflect on all of this. It took me more than 10 hours to cover the 90 kilometers, and there were thousands of skiers behind me who would finish late into the Swedish night. As I reached Mora, the church spire loomed over the countryside. The town had let the snow stay down the main street, and we kicked and glided toward a finish gate that bore the motto, I faders spar for framtid segrar, or, in our Father's tracks for future victories, one can only hope.